guess the thing that is what I've learned, how you know truth, because if you have a truth, let's say at the highest level, and if I can ever get to like gold and silver in its highest spiritual application, all the way down to the understanding people have of gold, it is the heaviest, densest, most precious metal. So get wisdom and get understanding. It says get gold and get silver. I mean, we're saying it's just ways of saying the same thing. All right. But even negative, so there's a correspondence between negative behavior, sinful actions, and the fruit of them, why some of them would deserve death. This helps you understand the Old Testament and what Yahweh was trying to do to preserve a people who were completely pure and holy that he could use, sort of almost like as his antenna. So if our bodies are like antennas, like that we were totally, that he was able to fill us and use us to be kings and priests on the earth to disseminate out and to help everybody else get up to this level. Unfortunately, we know how the story went. But let me read you this, because there are building blocks of all life, even fallen demonic entities that, and if you, in the Jewish, they have the Sefer, the Sitra Archa, which is the whole world, dark demonic side. And literally, you get down to it and point at the elementals. Like I was saying, gnomes last week, and salamanders, and Utes, and all these different words I can't remember. There are so many words. This is, and if you got into the dark side and the angelic names, the elemental spirits, all the correspondences that is going on in magic things, to use the dark side and allow free access up and down for these entities into our sphere. All right, but once you understand a truth and a word, how it's used, like I was saying, okay, the word sulfur, in Revelation there's a verse that fire, smoke, and brimstone. Okay, he will consume, I believe it's like consume the wicked, fire, smoke, and brimstone. Okay, but if you really look at it, fire, smoke, or brimstone are all different states of the same elemental entities. All right, fiery, in the Bible talk about fiery angels. Smoke is in the astral level. All right, and brimstone, which is the modern word sulfur. All right, and sulfur is in the periodic table, and sulfur is equated with the demonic side. That's why, and I said this a lot of times, it's happened to me. If you come into a demonic manifestation, a lot of times you'll smell sulfur. You'll smell like a rotten egg smell. It's like, oh my God, this is what. All right, so now there's a very apocryphal verse in Daniel which talks about in the last kingdom, iron mixed with clay, the toes, 10 toes. All right, so what is this talking about? Well, again, many levels, but on one level, there is an elemental. Okay, and it's a forbidden mixture. All right. So iron is mixed with, and the word is afar, which means dust, which is clay, which is the elemental building blocks in the Adamic man. We are full of the dust. The atom was made of the dust. All right, so we are used, certain holy elemental things are in us. Many things. All right, that's our. But if you mix it with iron, iron literally is equated with the demonic side. All right, if you mix these two, you have a different conductor going. You have a different system. All right, if you've made a whole new quote-unquote computer program, you've made, all right, which is part of what is the story going on here. But let me read you this from a science point of view, this professor at Woods Hole Marine Biology Laboratory, right? He did this experiment. He became intrigued by the strange behavior of some bacteria he was studying. He noticed that the bacteria was always clustered at the north side of the culture dish. Now, let me say this again, because when you get into the correspondences of the lower seven people understand there's always color, planetary. There is also direction: north, south, east, and west, up and down. See, this is all purposely coding and giving forth information. All right. So here we have bacteria clustering in the north side of the culture dish. All right. If he turned the dish so that they were at the south end, so he turned around so that they're actually facing south now, he would come back in the morning and he would find out that the bacteria was back at the north side. It like migrated back up to the north side. While such magnetotrophic bacteria, it had been described before, no one had ever done what he did, and he put it under an electron microscope. And what he found was that each of these little bacteria was a chain of tiny magnets. These magnets were actually crystals of the magnetic mineral magnetite, all right, which is the original. Now, all right, somehow the bacteria absorb the soluble components from the water and put them together in their bodies in this crystalline magnetic chain. So let me say this. So, because my point is this: magnetite is the original lodestone, is one of the primary ores in iron. So we're mixing. So I'm trying to make, there's a correlation here between iron and clay. Iron, magnetite, and those are the ores in iron. All right. It says here, and I don't really know why this is in here, but this is what triggered it. It says the original lodestone of pre-literate peoples. So when they were calling it the Iron Age, so I say the elitists or the occult are putting forth information. There were many living beings before Adam. This is what's coming out, but they did not have the breath. They were not of the higher order of this Adamic being. All right. All right. So let me see. So in Zohar understanding separately, the Sephrith of Gevera is called the North. This is why, if you don't really understand your Bible in these deeper levels, the sides of the North, all right, is the originating, emanative place for demonic, dark energies, angels, all right, sides of the North. Here you have this bacteria that is, and it's built into its system. If energy flow, like it says, the magnetic parts in it are causing them to kind of like a bumper cars. They lock in with each other. So they all lock in together, and they emanate, cluster in the north of the Petri. So what I'm trying to say, this is how precise the flow and elementals are linked together. The rabbis will tell you, the sages will tell you, I've always seen this over and over, I've read this, that they say that not even a blade of grass, that even a blade of grass has a mazal attached to it. And at first I was like, well, okay, it sounds great. But now I totally understand. The energy flow, let's say, is so precise. Even this little bacteria in this petri dish is lining up exactly where it's supposed to be with its originating energy flow. Now, why this is important and equated with pre-literate peoples. Now, later, let me just see what I, okay. Later studies showed that this arrangement was of value to these bacteria, which lived in the mud on the bottom of shallow bays and marshes. If they were moved by the tide or by storm waves, their magnetic chains were large enough, compared to their body sizes, I guess, to physically turn their bodies so that they pointed down an arrow corresponding to the direction of magnetic north. So, in other words, all they had to do, it was all like a program. It's all pre-programmed sort of in them. All the bacteria had to do was swim in that direction, or sooner or later, they would be back in the mud, pointing north again, happy as little clams in their little, under their muzzle. Okay? This is how crazy and how precise this is, all right? But the point in the larger picture is here, all entities are made up of certain combinations of elemental properties. This is something, science will tell you, and the basic building blocks. Hydrogen is in everything, in hydrogen and helium, which is the first and second period in the periodic table, and one is water and the other is sunlight, and it equates back to light and sound. See, so because water is a great conductor of sound. See, so I guess what I'm trying to say is we have to trust the information packaging, so to speak, that is in the writings, the mystical writings. And if we go back to that versus science, they're tweaking it in some of the most negative ways and not telling you what's going on in the bigger picture. That's why would we ingest all these heavy metals thinking, well, it's just part of modern life, this is the way it is, and not making the connection with all these diseases that are in our bodies, minds, and souls. All right? Now, let me go to this other thing. The North, when I was reading, at one point I was reading some of the Colburn Bible. I don't know, again, because it is a text coming back, whoever these elitist occultists are, they just keep putting some of these texts out there. It seems to be a chronicle of possibly either the tribes of Japheth or the tribes of Ephraim, the dispersed tribes, Northern Kingdom, through up their way up into the islands of the sea to England. It does give a lot of interesting information. It's very old, very archaic, but in it I read this very interesting little piece, and I've been looking. I had it cut and pasted, and I've been looking for it forever. Say a prayer that I find it, because what was in this little piece was that, and this gets into the story of Atlantis, and we can maybe nail down a little bit of what was going on. There was a conversation going on between okay, so if we hear that selenium comes from the element, is equated with Selene, a daughter of a Titan, all right? So we are talking about a non-corporal entity in the heavenly realms, basically. But Adam, okay, how do I say this? So the storyline goes that this person is having a conversation with an entity, another humanoid, that lived in the marshes, in the mud, in the outskirts of her domain, all right? So in other words, so she's, let's say, in the city or in the populated, settled area. This entity lives outside, cannot enter in the marshes, in the mud, in the reeds, in the thickets. See, these are all words too. If you understand that Cain, one of his means reed. So she entered into a relationship. So they started talking. And she was like, at first very distant, then she became more familiar, then they struck up a friendship. Then they struck into a love relationship, all right? I mean, there was this progression going on. And she brought him to her tribal elders, her leaders, and said, I want to marry this creature from the lagoon, from the bog, whatever. And they're like, well, you can't. it's forbidden. We don't do this. We stick with our kind because we want to keep a pure, clean stock. We need to protect our basic gene pool. All right. And she fought it and whatever. And I don't know if they eventually gave her permission or she just, eloped or whatever. But there again, you have this mixing of humanoid species. Now, is this an allegory for what is going on in terms of why? Because, the Bible texts are telling us that there are forbidden combinations. You don't mix, a clean and an unclean. And I'm going to, for very good reasons, because you will get what is called a mixed multitude. This gets into how did all of these quote unquote, it'll explain to us what is going on between the pure seed line, so to speak, the Adamics, and quote unquote, the mixed multitude. How do you get to be a mixed multitude? What are they talking about? So I think that there is in this an understanding we need to grow up into on so many levels, all right? Because there is an ethical level. And I think it is the highest ethical level that ultimately is going to win out as people understand this thing. But there's a piece of this, because what I just said sounds very politically incorrect, right? I mean, we're all equal, everybody's equal, it doesn't matter. But the reason today we can have this information, yet at the same time process the season we live in of Messiah ben Joseph and what Yeshua did for us, because the seed of Abraham has been a counter seed, because idiomatically, I'll tell you, seed of Abraham is equated with the seed of Yah. So in other words, Abraham's seed is Yah's seed, to Isaac's seed. This seed has been like working its way into all of the seed of the humanoids, and it has produced a leveling factor. So at this point, the iron and the clay are mixed. But oh well, that's okay, because the seed of Abraham is in all the earth. And so we are a mixed bag, we are a mixed multitude, but we have this antenna, we have this ability to connect through the seed of Abraham to our Heavenly Father. Even though we've got plenty of this quote unquote iron mixed in us, they don't. So this explains a lot of ways the battle, the battle for good, the battle for evil. This is such of a worldview that that we need to grasp this, but we need to grasp it again in a very high ethical way. Because after I finish with all these metals, I'm going to go into animals and explain what beasts are, how the word uses these things. And what has to be understood in this. All right, let me end with this, because again, this is, like I said, it's way beyond mine. But I will tell you one thing, last thing I know and understand. When you're trying to process all of this information, there's a couple fundamentals you always got to keep uppermost in your mind. And one of them is the different levels of the soul, the different kinds of souls that are incarnated out here. All right, there are three kinds. There's black souls, red souls, and white souls, and I have the three. See, this is the point. When we understand this thing so high ethically, we can get above all of Satan's lies, that it's a white race against the black race, and it's, we gotta have the black Hebrews who are the true. Oh my gosh, get over it, people. All right, it's not what it's talking about. Red souls are mixed multitude souls. They're not all good, they're not all bad. All right, a lot of us are in that. Black souls are truly, in this, you get into the deeper, darker sides of Luciferianism, and yes, there are bloodlines. There is a bloodline. It's pretty apparent. That's good. And then on the flip side, there are really holy, righteous Siddiqs in every generation. And it's good that we have this white and black, these souls, that are able to engage in this on levels that most are never going to even, oh my gosh, attain or understand. And that, but Yeshua is going to come, this whole, the Messiah ben David, this thing is going to be, it's going to come out, it's going to be exposed. People better get your place now. You better pick your place. Because, you know, I said, I come to this like musical chairs. The music is going to stop. When that trumpet sounds, the stakes are very high. So, but this is all part that has to be understood. The level and the levels of the soul and how to keep our souls, to elevate our souls. If you're a believer, if you're elected, you need to be very focused 100% on the narrow way, on making your soul as holy and as pure and elevating it before the music starts. So I hope you were able to track, and it's a blessing, and we're going to get there. And I just ask everyone, come on, we need to be an army in the earth today that will go where Yahweh, where their heavenly mother is leading us into understanding the text at this level of understanding. Shalom.